So, I was queuing for Ashran a few days ago, and I managed to queue directly into a battleground where a 24-man multiboxer was operating for Alliance. It's rare you see a large multiboxing operation firsthand, so I took the liberty of recording the footage. And as you've just seen, it's pretty devastating and game-breaking. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the multiboxing issue, its legality, its fairness, and how it interacts with the exploit community and the regular player base. First, multiboxing is the practice of playing multiple characters in a video game at the same time. Specialist software is used to coordinate actions, which usually leads to impressive game advantages, as you've just seen. Imagine an army where every soldier instantly repeated every action you took. That's essentially the power of multiboxing. It's one of the ultimate power fantasies of automation. Blizzard Entertainment, in an unusual fit of good communication, have ruled multiple times on the multiboxing issue and declared it to be an unambiguously acceptable gameplay strategy. They do not take action against multiboxers. I basically agree with this. Multiboxing is, in my humble opinion, something that should be permitted. However, the situation you are watching right now is brutally unfair from the perspective of the Horde. There's nothing they can really do in this situation to combat the attack of the multiboxer. The difficulty is that if 25 characters target you simultaneously, you are always going to die. Even the best pre-mades don't have that much coordination. It just isn't possible to work in sync that effectively. There are strategies which can be temporarily effective against multiboxers. You can outrange multiboxing teams using certain abilities, or use knockback in specific situations, sometimes even cut off the head by targeting the main control character. But while these ideas are interesting to discuss in theory, in practice they're usually too impractical to work for more than short periods. Ultimately, I think the problem is one that affects all unbalanced forms of video gaming. That the gameplay involved with multiboxing just isn't very interesting for anyone going up against it, because it's mainly an exercise in futility. On the other hand, you can queue all day as Alliance and never win Ashran, so it's not like the situation was exactly fair to begin with. Indeed, that was a big part of my motivation to start using exploits in the first place, to level the playing field so there's an actual competitive challenge that isn't decided by group composition the moment you enter a battleground. Now, I'm sure Horde players, or whichever faction is dominant at the given time, would say that they are winning on the level. But according to Blizzard, multiboxing is also on the level. And the truth is, Blizzard are very unlikely to ban multiboxing, because they would then be effectively banning a lot of whales defined as players who spend an extraordinary amount of money on the game, which is kind of a shit inconsistent reason, but that's always going to be the situation. Additionally, there's a bunch of stuff which happens with multiboxing where the rules that normally apply tend to get bypassed, whether the multiboxer is intending to break the game or not. The simplest example is lag. Normally speaking, Blizzard protect the game from player-created lag very zealously. If you try, for example, to use some exploit to crash servers, you will get permaban very quickly. In the very early days of streaming, streamers would get banned for simply assembling a lot of players in one place, even though the intention itself was innocent. Yet it seems that no amount of lag created by multiboxers results in any kind of countermeasure. It seems that there's a double standard being applied here, with Blizzard willing to bend the rules for what are, financially speaking, super users. Recent high-profile work by Rextroy and later Asmongold have vividly illustrated the power of Death Knight aura stacking in some recent and very spectacular YouTube videos. Exciting and entertaining as these videos are, this is not exactly new. I publish many methods on Patreon which, used by a team, are absolutely game-breaking. And I'm not just talking about PvP now. There are at least a dozen methods which work to this day, which would enable a team to do game-breaking passes, which would destroy any mythic boss Blizzard are likely to produce. Even relatively minor exploits can be dramatically amplified by a group. I tend not to produce this type of content on YouTube. The reason being that most players in WoW can't, for whatever reason, organise large numbers of players to do a specific thing easily. I try to create content that is accessible for everybody with a maximum level character. Also, there's a risk to my and other player accounts for openly publishing stuff like that. Even Rex Troy, who reports his methods to Blizzard, got banned initially, and I've never pretended to be anything other than an exploiter. One of the most concerning things about multiboxing is that it can become part of the stealth trend towards pay to win. If I were to use exploits to win in PvP consistently, I'd get banned eventually. However, you can just effectively buy your way to success in PvP, or to a less extent in PvE, with enough accounts, provided you can master the technical side of multiboxing, and there would really be no way for anyone to stop you. The trend towards pay-to-win generally is becoming more and more pervasive in WoW. At the moment you can buy eye-level 475 pieces of gear, not to mention a Brutosaur with real-life cash if you want. I have the Brutosaur and the advantage is actually ridiculous. The amount of time it saves is insane. So, as with real-life capitalism, in Shadowlands wealthy players are likely to become even wealthier. This, in turn, could breed resentment among regular players. This trend towards pay-to-win was and is very subtle, but that aspect of the game is becoming increasingly important. Going back to multiboxing, the economic advantages there are huge. With Gathering, for example, the way it works currently is that the same herb or aura can be used simultaneously by 10 different players. Immediately after a herb is picked or aura is mined, the node persists, allowing other multiboxing characters to use it. This means that a 10-man multiboxing operation is making 10 times as much money from Gathering professions. Playing solo, you'd be struggling to compete with that, even using some of the most powerful dupes. Although the reaction to my Patreon is mostly very positive, one criticism I've had more than a couple of times is that people believe the content is directed towards multi-boxers and botters. In truth, I have literally never botted, and I've never multi-boxed apart from a few experiments. I generally play solo as much as possible because that reflects the reality of the situation for most players. So any exploits I come up with are generally designed for solo players. I've literally never written anything substantive about multi-boxing. So why do some people say this? I think it is to do with the way many of my patrons who farm gold very seriously recognised long ago that multi-boxing was just a no-brainer. If you can make more gold than a token from multi-boxing a character, then it is worthwhile to multi-box that extra character. Consequently, if I post, say, a working dupe, which can be done solo, then often there are a lot of comments from multi-boxers who tend to be the most committed to making gold, and this creates a false impression of exclusivity. Indeed, some recent comments on my Patreon read like a masterclass on how to multi-box effectively. So I'm very curious what viewers think about multi-boxing. Normally when a YouTuber asks a question like that, it is a cynical attempt to get people to make comments on the video and raise its social engagement metrics, which is why I don't normally do it. In this case, however, I'm genuinely interested in what people think. Now, we've got the Shadowlands pre-patch coming up soon, and traditionally this is the most exciting time for the exploit community as everything changes and Blizzard break a ton of stuff. I'd strongly recommend, if you have any interest in exploits at all, that you subscribe now and click the bell notification if you haven't already, as you won't want to miss out. Also, it is a really good idea to sign up to my Twitter also, because that does a much better job of making sure you actually get my content as it's published. Thanks for watching. This has been Archvelder.